You stand up from your seat. It's a small, almost insignificant action, something you don't even think about. You walk toward the bathroom, the door opens, then closes behind you. But the moment you get up, you hear it. That familiar sound of paws tapping against the floor, steady and quiet. You didn't call for it. You didn't signal anything. It simply stands up and follows. You walk down the hallway, it's right behind you. You stop at the bathroom door, it stops too. And when you close the door, the story doesn't end there. It doesn't walk away. It lies down right outside, sometimes turning in a small circle as if finding the perfect spot, then goes still. Sometimes you'll see a paw slide under the gap, reaching into the space as if checking something. Other times there's no sound at all. But the moment you open the door, it's there, sitting quietly, looking up at you as if it never left, not even for a second. Every single day, every single time, and if you're like most people, you've probably wondered why. You might think it's clingy, you might think it feels insecure, or maybe more simply, you just find it a little annoying. But here's the interesting part. Every one of those explanations is wrong. And if that's what you've been thinking, then you may have completely misunderstood what your dog is actually doing every single day. In this video, we're going to go all the way to the root of that behavior, not with guesses, but with behavioral science, psychology, and the evolutionary bond that has been forming between humans and dogs for over 15,000 years. If you want to understand your dog in a way that very few people truly do, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now, because what you're about to learn might completely change the way you see even the most ordinary things your dog does. So let's start by clearing something up, because this is where most people get it wrong. What your dog is doing is not clinginess. It's not weakness. And it's not a behavioral problem that needs to be fixed. In fact, if you try to interpret it that way, you're looking at it entirely from a human perspective, not from the way a dog actually experiences the world. From your point of view, following someone into the bathroom might seem unnecessary, even excessive. But from your dog's point of view, it makes perfect sense. This behavior isn't random, and it isn't emotional instability. It's something far more structured, far more consistent, and far more deeply rooted than that. What you're seeing is a pattern that has been shaped over thousands of years, something that didn't appear by accident, and certainly didn't develop overnight. Through the lens of modern animal behavior science, this kind of following behavior has been studied for decades across different environments, breeds, and contexts. And again, researchers have arrived at the same conclusion. This is not a flaw in your dog's personality. It's a feature of its biology. To understand it, you have to zoom out. Not just to your home, not just to your daily routine, but all the way back through the history of how dogs and humans evolved together. Because what your dog is doing today, in something as ordinary as walking you to the bathroom, is actually part of a behavioral system that has been shaped over roughly 15,000 years of living alongside humans. And once you start to see it from that perspective, the meaning of that small everyday moment begins to change completely. And the deeper you go into the science behind it, the clearer it becomes that the real explanation is far more profound than anything it might look like on the surface. And the truth is, the answer is much deeper than you think. To really understand what's happening here, we need to look at one of the most important concepts in developmental psychology, something known as the secure base effect. This idea originally comes from studies on human infants, and it describes a very specific pattern of behavior that appears when a child is placed in an unfamiliar environment. When a baby enters a new space, they don't just wander off freely. Instead, they move away from their caregiver in small steps, constantly checking back. They crawl a short distance, then turn around to make sure their mother is still there. If she is, they continue exploring. If she's not, everything stops. Exploration ends immediately, and the child shifts into a state of searching, distress, and reconnection. This isn't fear or weakness. It's a highly adaptive survival strategy. Before an organism is capable of handling the world on its own, staying connected to a trusted figure is what keeps it alive. That trusted figure becomes what scientists call a secure base, a stable point that allows the individual to explore without losing a sense of safety. Now here's where it gets interesting. Researchers didn't stop at studying human infants. Behavioral scientists wanted to know whether this same pattern could be observed in other species, especially in animals that have lived closely with humans for thousands of years. So they designed experiments with dogs that closely mirrored the classic strange situation test used on children. In these experiments, a dog and its owner are placed in an unfamiliar room. After a short period, the owner leaves and researchers observe how the dog responds. What they found was remarkably consistent. Dogs show the same structural pattern of attachment that human infants show toward their mothers. When the owner is present, the dog is more relaxed, more willing to explore, and more confident. When the owner leaves, stress increases, exploration drops, and attention shifts toward the door or the point of exit. And when the owner returns, the dog quickly settles back into a calm state. The implication is very clear. From a behavioral and psychological standpoint, your dog relates to you in a way that is strikingly similar to how a young child relates to a parent. You are not just someone who provides food or shelter. You are a reference point for safety, a source of stability in an unpredictable world. In other words, you function as your dog's secure base. And once you understand that, a lot of behaviors that once seemed confusing start to make a lot more sense. The following, the waiting, the constant checking, these are not random habits. They are expressions of a deep, biologically rooted attachment system. The same system that keeps a child close to their mother is, in a very real sense, what keeps your dog close to you. But here's where things take a turn. Because while the attachment system is similar, the way dogs express it is fundamentally different. Human infants use what you could call a leave and return strategy. They move away from their caregiver, explore a bit, and then come back to check in. The child is the one moving. The parent stays relatively stable, acting as a fixed anchor in the environment. That back and forth movement is how the child balances curiosity with safety. Dogs, however, don't operate that way. They don't rely on leaving and returning. Instead, they use a completely different strategy, one that in many ways is even more efficient. Rather than allowing distance to happen and then correcting it, dogs reduce the distance from the very beginning. They don't wait until you're out of sight to check on you. They make sure you never leave their field of view in the first place. So when you stand up and walk away, they don't think, "I'll stay here and reconnect later." Their system is already responding in real time. They get up, they follow, and they position themselves in a way that keeps you within reach, visually, physically, and psychologically. From your perspective, it might look like simple following behavior. But from your dog's perspective, it's a form of control over uncertainty. By staying close to you, they eliminate the need for reconnection altogether. There's no gap to repair, no absence to process, no moment where they have to question where you went or whether you're coming back. And that's why something like going to the bathroom becomes such a consistent trigger. It's one of the few times in your daily routine where you actually disappear completely, where a physical barrier cuts off visual contact. And for a system that's built to prevent that kind of disconnection, the response is immediate and predictable. So the next time your dog follows you down the hallway, it's not because it's trying to check on you later. It's because it's making sure that later never becomes uncertain in the first place. It's not coming back to verify your presence. It's ensuring that you never leave its awareness at all. And that's the key shift in perspective. It doesn't go back to check if you're still there. It stays close to make sure you never disappear. To understand why that moment feels so significant to your dog, we need to go one level deeper into how it actually processes the idea of presence and absence. In human psychology, there's a concept called object permanence. It's the ability to understand that something continues to exist even when you can't see it. For you, this is so basic that you never question it. If someone walks into another room, you don't assume they've disappeared from existence. If a cup is covered by a cloth, you still know it's there. Your brain maintains a stable mental model of the world, even when parts of it are temporarily out of sight. But this ability isn't fully developed in all animals, and in dogs, it exists only to a limited degree. Studies in canine cognition have shown that dogs can handle simple versions of object permanence. For example, if you hide a treat under a cup, they'll go to the cup and find it. That's a straightforward visible displacement. But when the situation becomes more complex, when an object is moved while out of sight, or when there are multiple layers of concealment, their performance drops significantly. In other words, their brains don't always maintain a consistent mental map of where things are once they disappear from view. Now bring that back to a moment you experience every day. You walk into the bathroom and you close the door. From your perspective, Nothing unusual has happened. You're still in the same home, just in a different room, and you'll be back in a minute or two. But your dog's brain isn't necessarily processing it that way. The moment that door closes, you are no longer part of its visible world. And without a fully reliable sense of object permanence, your continued existence behind that barrier isn't something it can confidently hold on to. So instead of thinking, you're just in there, its system shifts into a different mode, one that's driven by uncertainty. It doesn't have a stable internal image of you waiting behind the door. What it has is a sudden absence of all sensory confirmation. No sight, limited sound, and only residual scent. And in that gap, the simplest explanation its brain can generate is that you're gone. Not in the sense of being somewhere else in the house, but in the sense of no longer being present at all. That's why the behavior becomes so consistent. When you close the door, your dog positions itself right outside, minimizing that uncertainty as much as possible. It waits not out of boredom, but out of a need to resolve that gap in information. And when the door opens and you step back into view, something important happens, not just emotionally but cognitively. The uncertainty collapses. The system resets. You're there again. Confirmation complete. From your side, it's a routine, almost forgettable moment, but from your dog's side, it's a repeated cycle of disappearance and return. And that's the key insight here. Every time you go into the bathroom and close the door, your dog isn't just waiting for you. It's processing the possibility that you've vanished, and then experiencing your reappearance as something real, something confirmed, something regained. In a very literal sense, each one of those moments is a small loss followed by a small reunion. Now this raises a very specific question. If everything we've talked about is true, then why does this behavior show up so consistently at the bathroom and not in every other part of your home? Why is it that your dog might not follow you every time you walk into the kitchen, but almost always follows when you head toward the bathroom? The answer comes down to a combination of 3 factors that overlap in a very precise way: visual interruption, scent concentration, and learned patterns. First, the visual factor. The bathroom is one of the few places in your home where the door is almost always closed. In most other situations, your living room, your kitchen, even your bedroom, there's usually some level of open access. Your dog can still see you, track your movement, or at least maintain partial awareness of where you are. But the bathroom door changes that completely. It creates a full visual cutoff. From your dog's perspective, it's not just that you walked into another space. It's that you disappeared behind a solid barrier, instantly and completely. And because this happens multiple times a day, it becomes the most consistent scenario where that sense of disappearance is triggered. Second, the scent factor. Dogs don't just experience the world through sight. They rely heavily on smell as a primary source of information. And the bathroom is a uniquely intense environment in that sense. It's a small enclosed space where your scent is highly concentrated. Not just general scent, but very specific biological signals that aren't present in the same way anywhere else in the house. From a canine perspective, this isn't just a room. It's a dense source of data. So when your dog positions itself outside the bathroom door, it's not only waiting, it's also processing. It's using scent as a way to gather information about you, your state, your presence, your condition. In a very real sense, it's reading you. So the behavior isn't passive, it's active, even if it looks still from the outside. And third, the pattern. Dogs are extremely sensitive to repetition. They are natural pattern learners, constantly mapping out routines based on what happens again and again. You go to the bathroom at certain times, when you wake up, before bed, at regular intervals throughout the day. At first, your dog may have followed you by chance. But each time it followed, something important happened. You came back. That return acts as reinforcement. The behavior gets validated. Over time, the pattern becomes stronger and more automatic. It's no longer a random choice. It's a learned response built on repeated confirmation. So when you put all 3 of these factors together, the visual cutoff, the concentrated scent, and the repeated reinforcement, you get a behavior that feels almost inevitable. This isn't your dog being strange or overly attached. It's the result of multiple systems working at once, each one reinforcing the same action from a different angle. And that leads to a very clear conclusion. This is not a random behavior. It's a learned, structured response, shaped by how your dog perceives the world. and how it has experienced your daily routine over time. Now here's where everything we've talked about begins to connect on a much deeper level. Because what looks like a simple behavior on the outside is actually tied to something happening inside both of your bodies at the same time. When your dog looks at you and you look back, there's a measurable biological response taking place. Both of you begin to release oxytocin, a hormone that plays a central role in bonding, trust, and emotional connection. It's the same chemical that is released between a mother and her newborn child. This isn't metaphorical. It's not poetic. It's something that can be measured in a lab, and it has been repeatedly. But it doesn't stop there. Physical contact, something as simple as petting your dog, has been shown to reduce cortisol levels in both of you. Cortisol is associated with stress, so when it drops, both your nervous systems shift toward a more relaxed, regulated state. What this means is that your presence doesn't just feel good to your dog, it actively helps regulate its internal state. And at the same time, your dog is doing the exact same thing for you. This isn't a one-way relationship. It's a mutual system of regulation and reinforcement. Now think back to that moment at the bathroom door. Your dog waits outside. You open the door. You look down. It looks up. That brief moment, just a second or two, is enough to trigger this entire biological response. Oxytocin rises. Stress drops. The connection is re-established. And because both of you experience that shift, the system reinforces itself. Your dog becomes more likely to seek that moment again, and your brain becomes more likely to respond to it. Over time, this creates a loop. Your dog looks at you, you respond, the bond strengthens. The bond strengthens, your dog seeks you out more. The more it seeks you out, the more these moments repeat. And each repetition makes the connection more stable, more automatic, more deeply embedded in both of your systems. This is not just affection in the casual sense. It's a feedback loop built into your biology. And that leads to a very important realization. When your dog follows you and waits for you, it's not just about making sure you're still there. It's also about maintaining this connection, resetting it, reinforcing it, keeping it active. Because in your dog's world, that connection is not optional. It's essential. What you're seeing is not dependency in a negative sense. It's a synchronized system of attachment, built across species, sustained through chemistry and strengthened every time you simply look at each other. In a very real sense, this is a loop of connection, what you could call a biological feedback loop of trust and bonding between two different species. And if we go even one step further, the connection between you and your dog doesn't stop at hormones or behavior. It extends all the way into how your nervous systems function in real time. Researchers have started looking at something called heart rate variability, or HRV, which is one of the most reliable indicators of how the autonomic nervous system is regulating stress and relaxation. High HRV is generally associated with a calm, well-regulated state. Low HRV tends to indicate stress, tension, or activation of the body's defensive systems. When scientists measured HRV in dogs and their owners across different situations, resting, interacting, or being separated, they found something remarkable. The patterns weren't independent, they were correlated. When the human was calm, the dog's system shifted toward calm as well. When the human became tense or stressed, the dog's physiological state changed in the same direction. And this wasn't a vague emotional mirroring. It showed up in measurable biological signals, synchronized across two different species. What's even more striking is that this effect becomes strongest during quiet, everyday moments when you're sitting together resting, or simply existing in the same space without doing anything special. Over time, through repeated exposure and shared routines, your dog's nervous system begins to learn your rhythm, how you respond to the world, how you recover from stress, how you settle back into calm. And in parallel, your own system begins to respond to your dog in subtle ways you may not even notice. So when your dog waits outside that bathroom door, it's not just waiting for visual confirmation that you still exist. It's also in a temporary state of disconnection from a system it has synchronized with, your system. And when you open the door and reappear, something resets. The alignment returns. The shared rhythm comes back online. From your perspective, it's just another routine moment. But from a biological standpoint, It's a reconnection between two systems that have been gradually tuning themselves to each other over time. And that leads to a realization that's hard to ignore. This isn't just about behavior or even about emotion. It's about regulation. It's about co-adaptation. In a very real sense, these two nervous systems, yours and your dog's, are learning how to function together, how to stabilize each other, and how to exist in a shared rhythm. Two nervous systems from two different species, learning how to live in sync. And there's one more thing you need to pay attention to, because it might be the most important part of everything we've talked about so far. If your dog has followed you to the bathroom for months or even years, doing it consistently, almost like a small daily ritual, and then one day, it suddenly stops, don't ignore that change. Dogs are highly dependent on routine. When a behavior that has been repeated over and over again simply disappears, there is always a reason behind it. Sometimes that reason is environmental. Maybe something in your home has changed. A new person, a different schedule, a shift in your daily rhythm. Dogs are far more sensitive to these changes than we usually realize, and what feels insignificant to you can feel like a disruption in their world. But in other cases, the reason is physical. In veterinary behavior science, one of the earliest signs of pain, especially joint or muscle discomfort, is a subtle change in activity patterns. A dog that used to get up and follow you everywhere, but suddenly stays lying down, might not be more independent. It might be in pain. And as dogs get older, there's another layer to consider. Cognitive decline, sometimes compared to Alzheimer's in humans, can affect a significant number of aging dogs. The earliest signs are often not obvious. It's not confusion or disorientation right away. It's small shifts in routine. Paths they used to take, they no longer follow. Habits they used to have, they quietly forget. And the most important thing to understand is this: your dog doesn't have language. It cannot tell you something feels wrong or I don't feel like myself lately. The only way it communicates is through behavior. So when that behavior changes, it's not random. It's information. It's a signal. And if you don't notice it, you miss the only way your dog has to tell you that something might be happening. So the next time you stand up and hear that familiar sound of paws behind you, you might see it differently. It's not clinginess. It's not something to brush off or feel annoyed by. It's a system built from attachment, shaped by cognition, reinforced by routine and supported by biology. It's your dog doing exactly what it has evolved to do in a world where you are the center of its stability. And when it waits outside that door, it's not just waiting for you to come back. It's holding onto the connection that defines its entire experience of safety. Because in its world, you are not just someone it lives with. You are the point everything revolves around. You're the place it returns to, even when you never really left. And in a way that's both simple and profound in your dog's world, you are something worth waiting for. So tonight, when you stand up and feel that quiet presence following you again, just take a moment and look back. You might not need to say anything. You might not need to do anything. But in that small moment, you'll understand why it's always there.